Did you know that in Islam, earning interest is forbidden? Did you know that in Hinduism, material prosperity is one of the 4 aims of life? Did you know that in the Bible, Jesus talks about money more than he talks about heaven and hell? In this video, we're going to look at what each of the major religions teaches about money. See if you notice any parallels between them. Alright, let's get into it. Let's start with Islam. In Islam, money is a blessing, but with clear boundaries. The Qur'an emphasizes justice and fairness in economic dealings, which is why interest, or riba, is strictly forbidden. That means many Islamic banks don't charge interest at all. Instead, they use profit and loss sharing models to ensure risk is shared and wealth is earned ethically. Muslims are also required to give zakat, an annual charitable donation of usually 2.5% of your savings to support the poor and the vulnerable. When the Prophet Muhammad founded the first Muslim community, or the Ummah, in the 7th century, he established a radical new social model based on voluntary generosity to help lift up the poor and needy in the community. When he died, he had little or no material possessions. The spoils of war were always shared equally among the Muslim armies, due to the idea that all Muslims were equal. And did you know that the 3rd Caliph of Islam, or the 3rd successor to Muhammad's rule, whose name was Othman, was a well-known and successful businessman, whose reforms, such as the digging of canals, the building of highways, and the improvements of irrigation systems, created great prosperity in the Muslim world? This shows that in Islam, prosperity is not a bad thing, as long as it doesn't corrupt the soul, and it is always used to help the community and benefit those who are most in need. Now, Christianity. In the Bible, money is often seen as a spiritual test, a moral mirror, and often a dangerous temptation. Ever heard the phrase, money is the root of all evil? Well, that comes from the Bible. Jesus spoke about money more than almost anything else, more than heaven and hell combined. In fact, roughly 1 in 10 verses in the Gospels talk about the dangers of wealth, famously saying, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." He also said, "You cannot serve both God and money," and warned that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Wealth itself isn't necessarily condemned, but how do you use it? That matters a lot. Christians are taught to give generously and help the poor and needy at every opportunity. Jesus praised poor people who gave small amounts with sincere hearts, over rich people who gave for show. Hoarding wealth is frowned upon. Jesus said, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but store up treasures in heaven." However, Jesus did encourage people to work hard and diligently. He said, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." So working hard is definitely not a bad thing, as long as it doesn't lead to greed. Next, Buddhism. Central to Buddhist thought is the idea that suffering, or dukkha, arises from craving and attachment, including the desire for wealth and possessions. Money itself is not inherently evil, but clinging to it is a major obstacle to spiritual liberation. The Buddha himself, whose real name was Siddhartha Gautama, was born into luxury in a royal family and didn't leave the walls of his palace until he was 29 years old. It was only when he sneaked out one day and saw all the suffering in the world that he renounced his life of royal luxury to pursue enlightenment. However, he didn't advocate selling all your possessions and living in poverty. Instead, he taught the middle way, which avoids both extreme indulgence and external deprivation. The Buddha encouraged right livelihood, which was one of the steps on the eightfold path to wisdom and enlightenment. Right livelihood meant that one should earn a living in ways that are non-harmful to others, so that meant avoiding trading in things like weapons, slavery, alcohol and drugs. Additionally, he emphasized dana, or generosity, as a key virtue, not only because it helps others, but because it frees the giver from greed and cultivates compassion. In this sense, Buddhism treats money not as a goal, but as a potential tool for spiritual development, provided it's handled with awareness, ethics, and detachment. In Hinduism, money and material prosperity are not viewed as bad or spiritually corrupting. Rather, they are seen as one of the legitimate goals of human life, known as Artha. Artha is one of the four aims of life, alongside Dharma, which is righteousness, Karma, which is pleasure, and Moksha, which is liberation. The pursuit of Artha involves earning wealth, becoming financially stable, and fulfilling your responsibilities, such as supporting a family, giving to charity, and contributing to society. However, Hindus emphasize that wealth must be pursued ethically in harmony with Dharma or righteousness. Greed, hoarding, or exploiting others for gain are considered spiritually damaging and ultimately self-defeating. The proper use of wealth is not for indulgence alone, but for sustaining life, performing sacred duties, and helping others. The blessings of the goddess Lakshmi, who symbolizes prosperity and fortune, are believed to come to those who practice self-discipline, generosity, devotion, and integrity. In Judaism, money and wealth are seen as blessings from God, but also as a profound responsibility. The Torah emphasizes that while pursuing financial success is legitimate and even encouraged, it must be guided by ethical behavior, social justice, and compassion. Wealth is not simply a personal asset, but a resource entrusted by God to be used for the welfare of the individual, the family, and the community. The concept of tzedakah, often translated as charity, but more accurately meaning justice or righteousness, is central, underscoring that giving to the poor and vulnerable is a moral obligation, not just an act of kindness. Jewish law outlines detailed guidelines on fair business practices, honesty in trade, and prohibitions against charging excessive interest. The Sabbath year, Shemitah, institutionalized periodic debt forgiveness and land restitution to prevent long-term economic exploitation. Additionally, Jewish tradition values hard work and diligence as means to sustain oneself and others. In Sikhism, it is taught that earning money should be done through honest, hard work, kirat karni, without deceit or exploitation. Wealth itself is not condemned, but attachments to material riches and greed are cautioned against, as they can distract the individual from spiritual growth and devotion to God. Central to Sikh economic ethics is the principle of Vand Chakna, which means sharing one's earnings with others, particularly those in need. Sikhs are taught to ensure that wealth benefits the wider community, not just the individual. Sikhs are encouraged to live a life of moderation, enjoying their fruits of their labour without excess, and, similar to Buddhists, to follow a middle path, not overly decadent, but not overly destitute either. And what about indigenous spiritualities? In many cultures, from Native American to Aboriginal Australian, money is less important than reciprocity, balance, and respect for the earth. Wealth is often measured in relationships, generosity, and community well-being, not bank balances. In some tribal societies, giving away wealth during ceremonies, like the potlatch, actually increases your status, because generosity is strength. Indigenous tribes tend to follow what we would call a communist model, where the resources are shared out equally amongst everyone. And finally, what do atheists believe about money? Well, it's up to them. Many atheists create their own values of generosity and compassion, giving to charity and renouncing greed with their own moral compasses. Other atheists, without the framework of religion to guide them, see no reason not to hoard wealth. If there's no moral dimension to the universe, it's every man for himself. What do you think? Do you see any similarities between the religions? Let us know in the comments below, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. See you on the next one.